So in the last video we talked about taking a CSV file in Python and opening it using the CSV module. And now I want to talk about a concept of indexing. When we get a lot of data, oftentimes we want to be able to search on something. And this is very easy in a relational database. It's all done automatically. But let's say we wanted to do it in an easy way in Python. Now, part of your lab for the week is you're going to be getting a very large data set. And the problem is if you wanted to search this data set for an email address, if you didn't index, and what indexing is taking a piece of data and making it the pivot of that data. So for instance, if we take email address and we wanted to search it every time without indexing, we would have to go through every single row each time, ask, is that email address in a row? If so, then grab the row. So if you had a list of 1,000 entries in a CSV table, and that email address was the very last one, you would have to go through all 1,000 entries in order to get the data that you want. Whereas if you indexed, essentially on the back end creating a tabular reference of email address to row, and so on and so forth, it makes searching for data a lot quicker. So then we only have to iterate through the data once, and now that email address becomes the key or the index that you can search off of. Let's look at an example to make this a little more clear. So we have this context table, and we have 3 rows, Matt, Sue, and Bob. And let's say that we wanted to know, given an email address, what is the first name of the person. So before we showed an example of iterating through every row in a CSV file. So here it's for row in context reader. We printed the row. Well, this time what we want to do is ask the question, is this certain email address in a row? So if, let's say, what email address do we want to search? bob@example.com. And that was in the third column. So if row 2 equals bob.example.com, we want to show the first name. Print, found it, first name, and the first name was the first column, so row 0. Now what does this do? We're going to open the file, we're going to read the file, and then we're going to iterate through every single row, and we're going to ask, okay, if the email address for that row matches bob@example.com, print the first name. So we'll go ahead and save this file. And great, we found it. The first name was Bob. So let's say we wanted to allow the user to perform this search. So let's take this and make it into a function. So make a function here. Def find first name, and we'll have a variable email, string, wrong language, result name equals, and I'll explain this in a second. lot of typing and me not talking. Hold on, I'm just thinking while I'm writing. So if input string is not equal to stop, print find first name string. All right. So there was a lot of me typing. Let's see, return row 0. Otherwise, we're just going to return a blank string. Email. And return blank string. Let's save it and let's see if this worked. Bob@example.com, and I'll explain the code in a moment. Result name, unused variable. Need this. Open this, input string, save. All right, so let's try it. Great. All right, so how does this work? And I did a lot of typing, and I'm sorry I didn't talk during it. So essentially, we took our loop where we search for row in context reader. If row is equal to bob@example.com, this time email, return the row. So what we did was we took the knowledge of how do we look through every row of a CSV file. So we begin our program same way. Line 3, open the CSV file. So we're opening this CSV file. And in context reader, we are reading the context file into this CSV reader object, which provides the rows. And then what we did was we put all this in a function, and we said, okay, we're creating a function called find first name. So we're trying to find a first name given an email address. Given that email address, we look, okay, for every row in context reader, if the row email address column is equal to the email address we supplied, return the first name, which is in column 1, so index 0. So recall the email address is in column 3, so index 2. And the first name is in column 1. And we turn that into a function. If there's nothing, if we didn't find anything, we wind up here, which will just return a blank string. And then finally, we're going to run this function. So how do we run it? We're going to create essentially a while loop that says, okay, until the user tells me stop, we're going to grab the input from the user. What email would you like to search? Save it in the variable input string. And then we're going to run that search for that email address. We're going to call this function supplying in the email address we passed into the input. So let's try it again. Let me clear it. So if I run this application or this script and I say bob@example.com, okay, if I type in my email address, mdctric@gmail.com, we get nothing. We get nothing, which leads to another issue that I want to tell you about, which is essentially resetting the iterator. So once you run through this reader list, remember it's using a file stream, and we didn't talk about this in previous weeks, but you essentially have to reset the file stream point. So each time we're going to have to set that pointers to the first bit in the file, And we do so using seek. All right, so let's save this. And now let's run it again. Okay. Okay. If I type in meat, we get Matt. And if I type in some garbage, we get nothing. If you type in Sue at example.com, we get Sue, and so on and so forth. So again, what we've done is each time we want to search this email address, we're running through the whole list again. And that can be problematic, especially when you have a really, really, really large data set, as you're going to have in this week's lab. So let's cause some problems. Let me see here. So we have this context.csv. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to make, let's see here. Let's go to our mock, or our, where's our mock data file? Okay, I'm going to make our context file really, really large. So, okay. How many lines can I make this? How many lines till I can cause Visual Studio to go crazy? All right, so at the very end of this file, I'm going to create an entry for Joe. And Joe is at line 120,960. And this is where I'm going to show you how this causes major issues. If we were to search Joe, each time we wanted to search Joe, it's going to have to go through all 120,000 lines, and it's going to take a while. So let's save this file. Let's see how big our file got. Refresh. All right, it's 5 megabytes in length. So let's exit this. Now, let's run our file again, and we want to search Bob at example.com. Okay, result is Bob. Great. That took like 2 seconds, right? Because Bob was at the very beginning of the list. We did repeat Bob multiple times. I understand the implications of that, but right now it only had to go through 3 lines. So we read our code, find first name. We put Bob at example.com. It goes through the file. 1 line, 2 lines. At the 3rd line, it returns we've exited. Let's try to search Joe at example.com. All right, Joe. Found that pretty quick. Maybe we need to make our file bigger. All right. I'll paste this in here. 200,000 lines. Almost 500,000 lines. There we go. So we got about 2 million lines. At the very end here, we'll give this person a different name. Mike. And Mike at example.com. We'll save that file. It's going to take a second. So we have 1,935,360 lines in this file. Finally saved. Let's see how big it is. Refresh. Okay, 83 megs. So let's run this again. And we're going to search for, it's loading it all in there. Mike@example.com. We hit enter. Okay, now we're taking a bunch of time. So if we had to do this over and over and over again, it's going to take a significant amount of time because it has to iterate through every single line in the file. And finally it's done. So if we run it again, you see it's taking the same amount of time to process. So we can use the concept of indexing and the concept of dictionaries in Python to essentially process this file once, so that we're not constantly going through the whole thing. So how do we do this? Essentially what we'll do is we'll create a new dictionary. Context dictionary equals new dictionary here. So just dict with a open parentheses and a close parentheses. And then what we'll do is we're going to index on the email address. So so for row in context reader, instead of processing it here, we're just going to do if. So in this case, again, we have the row, and for each row in context reader, we're going to add that row to the dictionary. So if, I have an if statement there, context dictionary, email address, remember that's the second row, equals row. Now, all we have to do is, and find first email, return email 0. And we'll save this file. So let's walk through what we did. So what we did was we created a new dictionary. And if you recall a dictionary in Python, I'll make a comment. Essentially it's key and then some value, right? So we can access it. Let's say the value is the row. We're treating the email as the key. So then we can access the dictionary like this. So essentially you place the key within the brackets and you receive the value. So we're pre-processing the CSV file into a Python dictionary, each row by its email address. So we're essentially indexing off the email address. Now it should be incredibly quick. Now the processing will be slow initially. So let's cancel this out. Clear it, and we'll run our program again. It's going to take a second because it's converting everything into a dictionary object. So we're essentially front-loading the data. So now if I search Matt at mdctryc@gmail.com, can only concatenate stir, none type. All right, probably made a mistake. Because I didn't return it, that's why. So we want to return this dictionary entry, and I'll walk through the code again in a second. Just want to make sure that it works. Okay, again, front loading the processing of the dictionary. So we're going through every row in the CSV file, adding it to the dictionary now. Gmail.com. All right, we hit enter, we get Matt. Now at the very end of that CSV file, we have, I forgot how long it takes to load. So we clicked on the tab, we have Mike, right? And we saw how long that took to search. Now, if we search Mike at example.com, we get it instantaneously. And if we do it again, it's instantaneously. Why? Because we've pre-processed the CSV file. We took the email out, turned that to as the dictionary key for each row, and now all we need to do is rely on Python to do that indexing and mapping of the dictionary, which makes it super fast. Now, it will pop an error right now if we have junk, right? So that happened before. You saw that error, and I had to fix a mistake in my code. So if you recall from previous weeks, we can actually use the in operator to see if a email address is in the dictionary. So if, wrong place. If email in contacts dictionary, then we want to return the first name. Otherwise, we just return nothing. And then what we can do here is result equals this if result not equal to a blank string, else colon there. All right, so how did that work? So we've pre-processed our dictionary, and in our function, when you pass in the email, we say if the email address is a key in that dictionary, return the email, otherwise return a blank string. And then down here, we call the function and we put the result into the result variable, and we ask, okay, if it's not a blank string, print that result. Otherwise, print no email found. All right, so let's go ahead and run this again. Okay, pre-processing all the data. Okay, now let's search Matt at, mdctric@gmail.com. We get Matt back. Mike at example.com. We get Mike. Bob at example.com. We get Bob. Sue at example.com. We get Sue. And then if we put in junk, anything else, no email is found. Francine at no email found. Because again, each time we're checking to see if that email is a key in a dictionary. So again, this is, I know in last week when we talked about regular expressions, I got a lot of questions around, so is this the most efficient way of doing it? And for the smaller data sets, there were multiple solutions. But once we get to these larger data sets, pre-processing, breaking jobs into bits and pieces, front-loading data processing, and using tools like dictionaries allows for quicker results, allows you to parse massive amounts of data. So when we talk about your lab this week, that's what we're going to be doing. I'm gonna have a really, really big list of CSV data, and you're going to be doing something very, very similar to this. I really encourage you to watch the video again. Look at my processing. Again, what I wanted to do in writing this code essentially live in the video is talk about the thought process. If you're presented with a problem, how do we write a piece of code from scratch, a larger application? So this is essentially what we did. We started off in the first video, how do we even load a CSV file? How do we iterate through each row? And then we took the problem of, okay, let's say we have a larger set of data. What does the problem look like then? And then how do we solve it? We said, oh, Python Dictionaries is the solution. And then you can visibly see how long it takes and how long the difference when you index off of a key, like an email address, versus processing through a whole CSV file each time around. So again, if you have any questions, let me know. Hopefully this was a bit enlightening. I know that it's not a lot of content about CSVs this week, but I really wanted to tack on a more thoughtful approach to, okay, if we have larger amounts of data, how do we handle it? And this is what we'll be focusing for the lab this week.